All right, guys, welcome to our case study for class. Just want to quickly go over the agenda for what we're going to do today. We are looking at case study number 1 for the APSEL. The title is The Principal as the Instructional Leader. So in this meeting, we have 4 questions that we're going to address for this case study. My thought process is there are 4 questions, so we're going to have a time limit of at least 10 minutes each. If we start to go over 10 minutes, I'll go ahead and shut it down and just ask to make sure everybody has what they wanted to say, and then we'll move on to the next question. May or may not be 10 minutes, but I will stop it at 10. So what we're going to do first is, Matt, how are you doing today? How's it been going?
Well. Yes, ma'am, doing great.
Rebecca?
Well, it's a lovely Monday.
I think though, we are all relieved that we have turned in that first APSEL. We have hit the submit button. Tell you what, I feel good about it. Hey, so going into this, first thing I want to do is just briefly go over the case study. We've all read it, so I just want to hit some of the points of what's going on so we're all on the same page. And here we have at Webster School, we'll say that wasn't a good place to work. It says that maybe the building morale was a little bit down, and they were looking to hire a new principal. And what they did is they found a guy who was on staff, who was really popular with the staff. And so they decided to make him the principal. I think it was kind of maybe decided not based so much on his skill because he had not been a principal before, but the fact that maybe he could boost the building morale and get everybody on board to work in a more positive environment. A couple of things, a couple of problems that we're going to encounter, Mr. Carmichael, was that they had a reading problem, or the reading scores were very low. And that was going to be one of the things that he was going to have to address immediately when he took over the school. And then the other thing was the building morale. And so with that being said, if you guys want to add anything, I was kind of quick going through, but I think that's kind of the gist of the situation. The school board definitely was behind him and said they would definitely help Mr. Carmichael on anything that he needed. So I think that was good. They kind of didn't just throw him in the deep end and say, go figure it out on your own. So with that being said, we'll just jump right into the first question. Look at my notes here. Okay, so question number 1. What do you think of the way James handled his particular situation, considering his limited background? And I believe when they say his limited background was the fact that he had not been a principal before. So he hadn't really been the leader of the school in that sense, to have to manage entire staff and the students. So either of you want to go first?
I can. James is really smart in delegating his responsibility to others, more experienced members of his team. He looked to Clarice Johnson, the reading coach, and he also got advice from Betty Walker, the superintendent. Communication was clear and fair with his staff members and the students. I quoted Urban et al. That James investigated his stakeholders with the parents and the reading coach of his school. He did not try to multitask or demand progress be met. He simply considered all his options and knew what he had and what he was looking for others in his journey to meeting the reading needs of his students.
Okay, very good. Matt?
I'd agree. I think Rebecca brought up a good point about the delegation part. And, I thought he did a very good job delegating to his experts and bringing the faculty in. I believe that helped with the morale issue. In addition to that, I thought it was interesting that he did start to work on the individual level too, by creating the small group settings that he did where they met, you know, at least once a month. So I thought he did two things in tandem with the delegating to experts to actually bring them in, collaborate with them as a whole. I thought that was wise. In addition to that, the small group setting where it allowed folks to kind of work together. And I started to look for some research to kind of support and kind of key in on that. And Michael Fullen did a work, or I read a work a little bit from him with a title, Change Theory, A Force of School Improvement. And it talked about how that, you know, a successful strategy involved changing the individual and the culture together. And I thought that James did that. He worked on the culture of the school by getting the input of those stakeholders in the delegation part, as Rebecca mentioned. But in addition to that, he worked on the individual level as well in those small group settings too. So I thought that was most effective for him with his limited background and experience.
Yeah, I agree with you guys on that. The other thing that stood out to me with James and his situation is that they mentioned in the case study that he was pretty much he was popular and all the teachers loved him, which, you know, now in a leadership role, all that was going to change a little bit for him, how he was going to manage his staff and faculty. And so I looked at Daggett's System for Effective Instruction Research and Best Practices Meet by Willard R. Daggett. And it talked about, so I want to talk about like the building relationships when he called the teachers together, especially the ones that he was close to, you know, said, hey, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to have to manage you. I'm going to have to instruct you. I'm going to have to lead you. How would you want me to handle this as far as, you know, I'm not your friend anymore, but as a leader. And so in the article I read, it talked about building strong relationships, and that one of the findings was that research on characteristics of successful schools founded by Gates Foundation was that the student-teacher relationship had a major impact on the student achievement, as well as building the efficacy in the building. The presence of strong, positive, trusting relationships impacts the student engagement, and therefore fuels the student's sense of belonging and commitment to their own learning, and as far as the teacher relationships. So I thought by taking that, you know, sitting down and talking to those teachers was going to just boost the teacher morale, which, you know, if the teachers feel good, you know, then also the students, the learning would definitely be improved. So I thought that was excellent of him to do. Anything else on that one?
Shay, I kind of thought about you, you know, I know you coach, but when I started reading this case study, I thought about you a little bit with this one too. And so I thought that was just kind of interesting and ironic, but you know, he commanded sort of, there was an air about him in the classroom is the way I see that, or in the gym. And,
Yeah.
you know, neat to see that he brought that to the school as well. And, you know, a lot of times I think a good coach makes a good administrator because they know how to work with people. And I think, you know, underlying here without any research or anything like that, as a people person, I think James was probably effective because he knew how to work with people too. And he put the right pieces together, and the research kind of looks at that and proves that part as well. So interesting.
Yeah, I definitely thought the same thing when I read that. I was like, oh, that's me right there. But just the things that he did, and like some of the research about just, he was, you know, people won't let you talk to them unless they know that you care. You know, you talk to people, and I always said, oh my goodness, that's the kind of principal I want to be. I'm not going to just be sitting in my office and be untouchable. Doors going to be open. I want to go, I want to talk to the students. I want to meet the people. I want to talk to the parents and kind of get things rolling. And, you know, I think when you're like that, so you can get a lot of people behind you. So even though, you know, I said, like, consider his limited background, he didn't have much in that, but because of his personality, he could get the people who were strong in the areas that he wasn't strong in, and, you know, kind of get things going in the right direction. Like Clarice, getting her on board and doing some things. So, you know, if people don't like you, they won't work for you.
Right.
And I think that's a coaching philosophy too. If the kids don't like you, they're not going to play for you. Okay, so then we'll go on to question number 2. What more could be done to help the reading scores in his school? And they started out with Clarice, and he started going around to the classes, meeting with all the teachers and going to the reading conferences is what they did. So what do you guys think? I think Rebecca, you went first on that one. Matt, do you want to start out?
I can jump in if that's okay on this one. It's a little bit ironic as well that we talked about that tonight in the town hall. We talked about the taking good teachers and making them leaders, and it's almost a PLC focused reading group. I think there was an improvement that could have been done with the small groups, but he took the reading and used those PLC groups or I don't know that they necessarily call it that in the case study, but he used those small reading groups to kind of, get the reading scores done and get them improved. But to me, I think there could have been maybe a little bit more. What more could have been done to help the reading scores in the school? I think if he would have gone more to that conceptual PLC that we see with Do4, then I think maybe that would have helped the reading scores in addition. I think he was dabbling in it. He was hitting it on that by bringing folks together. And the case study said at least, once a month he would meet with them.
Mhm.
I think that was beneficial. I also think it's beneficial that he got the experts involved, but teachers learning from themselves and by pulling those reading teachers together, I thought that was beneficial. I looked at a guy, Mike Schumacher. I think that's how you say this guy's name. And back in 2006, results now, how can we achieve unprecedented improvement in teaching and leadership? He talks about getting teachers to learn from each other. And I think that was starting to be evident in this case study, that those groups were meeting, and that helped the reading scores. But what could have been done to help them more? A true Do4 PLC, structured and meeting more often than just once a month, I think would have helped those reading scores in addition. But it seemed like he was dabbling a little bit, and it mentioned he's got limited experience. So I think it's a good start, and I think probably in his future it's going to strengthen.
Matt, I found the same thing when I wrote down some notes about forming that instructional leadership team and identifying the teachers as leaders to challenge a little bit. And I thought that they didn't really kind of dig into why the students weren't learning. It's like, okay, I'm trying to find here where I wrote down such a team. Yeah, so let's dang, where was I here? Okay, this one says, if the principal has an instructional leadership team to collaborate with, to identify the teaching and learning challenges, and then let's do something to support those teachers to solve these challenges, then the teachers will be better able to improve the instructional practices. So I think that, he didn't really kind of figure out like, hey, why the students not learning? And then let's go ahead and get some best practices. And I read that on how principals affect students and school systems systematically. And so that's when they talked about kind of forming more of the PLC teams and really diving into the data and why the students aren't learning, and the particular students and so forth. So, Rebecca.
I focused more on the student motivation. I said along with the state reading conferences, to buy materials, the team could invest in maybe a software program that allows for fluency and comprehension study. And then after reviewing the school-wide reading model, James could start a school-wide reading incentive program. I know that like with Altridge and our current trends setting, they said be careful with rewards, but I really have seen a lot of progress, like it buys into the student motivation and, the conditioning of, okay, I'm going to get small tokens or or meet my goals throughout the course of the semester that might have more buy-in for the students.
Okay. Yeah.
I think that's it, Rebecca. I think that's a good point. And I hadn't really thought about that, but a school-wide motivation, I got hung up on the PLC, and after that, APSL, task 1 and 2, and I'm like thinking, good gracious, the PLC is just not going as what we were, recently talking about. But I think you bring up a good layer there that I hadn't thought about with the school-wide motivation, and there's really nothing mentioned there, and that could have, helped the school culture and climate probably in addition to what they were doing. It's a good point.
Yeah, I think so too. I definitely agree with that. So we'll wrap up number 2. We'll move on to question number 3. Question number 3, what additional resources could James utilize to help the school improve? And I read a couple different articles. Saw one, successful schools from research to action plans. And so I thought that a focus on instruction rather than structure increasingly throughout the country has, this is what I'm reading from where I did some research on about focusing on instruction rather than structure. And in that research, it says too often schools get caught up in trying to make structural changes, such as moving into small learning communities, block style scheduling, and things like that. But, sometimes that may or may not work. And so I thought that, like he could, just do something different as far as that instruction. Like instead of, he just jumped in, hey, let's figure out how to do an overall type of solution for this. But I think that he could have kind of broken it down a little bit more on, like, okay, what is the focus? Like, what's going on? Is it starting, I guess, basically with the incoming students? Are we losing the instruction from the teacher to the students, or the students already coming in low performing prior to, the actual instruction happening? So I don't know. Either one of you can jump in if you want.
For me, I said that maybe along with the support of the superintendent, he needed to look at his community. You mentioned before, Shay, that he kind of won the popularity contest. He had a petition signed by the parents, the staff, and the students, and he needed to really play up that and maybe build a parent-teacher organization that could represent the school as a whole and serve for the parent as liaisons, and then have regular conference with the PTO and the parents in general to contribute to the development of a positive learning environment. I think if the parents had say, or the parents came in and volunteered and they read to the students, it would help with that overall motivation piece I was talking about.
Yeah, I think Rebecca's right. I think that would have been a great asset too, an additional resource that would have brought wonders to helping the kids learn a little bit better. One of the things that, and I'm just going to assume that it wasn't present, but the one thing I kind of keyed in on, it didn't seem like that there was a school improvement plan. Maybe there is, but it wasn't really specifically mentioned. And I wondered if the school had that in place. I looked at some stuff from Davies and Ellison about framework for good school improvement planning, and it just didn't feel like that was in place. And this is going to kind of touch in my number 4 answer just a little bit, and I'll try to keep it in the right lane here. But it's almost like when he sits down with the superintendent, and I'm going to throw her under the bus just a little bit. The superintendent just kind of says that culture and climate and reading, it really was shallow. And maybe there was more discussion in the real world setting, but just didn't seem like there was really a plan or data or teacher working condition survey or anything mentioned. It's just kind of just this is what we need to work on. So I think maybe with the development of a school improvement plan, then it could have gotten down to the nuts and bolts of helping math and social studies and science in addition to the reading. So you kind of walk and chew gum both at the same time, and and don't get more behind with the math and science and social studies. But a true school improvement plan would have let those other areas be sort of improved in tandem with the reading portion.
Well, I'm looking at the case study and kind of some of the things that they were doing, and I think they didn't really also touch on actually changing how the instruction was given. So I think we looked at an APSEL is like just the different ways that the students are learning. And so like I was saying with my research, it was like, hey, let's figure out how to teach the individual kid and figure out, hey, learning style is a little bit different. So I didn't really think that they kind of went and said, hey, let's figure out how to teach each of these kids individually. They just kind of jumps like, hey, let's do this, we're gonna do that. Now the reading scores did, they said the reading scores did improve and he was happy with that. I mean, we're always gonna be happy with improving scores, but then also it's about maintaining and being consistent and making sure the scores are going up. And if we aren't able to teach all the kids, eventually we're gonna get to a point where we're not gonna improve anymore.
Right. It does seem like it's almost like a shotgun blast. There's no surgical precision to the plan. It's just like, well, let's just meet some teachers together and, hey, we improved our reading scores because we got some collaboration started. So, I think there's some benefit, but I would have liked to seen a little bit more data or a little bit more planning in place. And it wasn't evident in the case study to me.
And maybe it's just a little bit brief because it was only one page, but
Right.
no, but hopefully his Clarice or someone said, hey, let's look at this data because we know how important that data is. All right, and then we're moving on to question 4. Here, what could he be sacrificing, if anything, by placing extraordinary emphasis only on the reading program?
I'll jump in right quick on that one, and it kind of dovetail a little bit in answer 3. I think there needed to be a more systematic and multi-dimensional process. And I looked at some stuff for Cohen Joyner, if I can talk right here, and Beckwith. They were talking about getting serious about the system. Again, I think, there's an absence of the mention of a school improvement plan. And I would have liked to have seen a more structured plan in place that would have helped a systematic and a multidimensional, where those areas could have been, other areas in addition to reading could have been served a little bit better too. I think those are the areas that are sacrificed here in this particular case study.
Yeah, so for me, I was looking at some research on how principals affect students in schools. Excuse me, I'm gonna get some water real quick. And so in this study, it talked about, principals taking on these new jobs and, trying to focus on certain things. And, like James jumped in and said, hey, I want to focus on this reading, and we're going to kind of, just focus on reading, that's emphasis. And then we kind of lose track of, what else is going on in all the other content areas. In this study, it said that the other content areas that weren't being focused on, the scores dropped. And so then it was like, they kind of had to start over and revamp everything the next year to kind of get everything, going, because the first year principal was like, hey, I really want to focus on, I think it was math scores in the study. And then the other scores from the other content areas kind of did fall by the wayside. They fell a little bit. And then, so the next year is like, okay, I need to focus on, getting more. And I think that, by focusing on the one area, I mean, it's good, but if you're going to let another area kind of fall to the wayside, then I'm not sure that it's worth it, because, you can cross curriculum. If it's reading, reading is going to help you in math. Math is going to help you in another area. And then you're kind of getting all the teachers on board at the same time on the PLC to really make a consistent change, versus just saying, okay, we're going to do this reading and then not focus on the other things. So like I said, the research said, we kind of need to focus on everything. James, first year teacher or first year principal, wanted to focus on one thing and kind of get it right and then move on to something else. But like I said, the research trying not to give my opinion. Says we need to make sure we focus in on overall everything of the entire school to make sure that all the scores are up and that everyone's being focused and that we're having a overall improvement in the entire school, not just the one content. So was he sacrificing anything? I think that the other contents, were being sacrificed, but not having that focus and not having the PLC and not having the professional developments to help them be, up to par with the reading.
Right. For me, I said by placing his sole focus on the reading program, James is ignoring, say, the math in his school. Did the students need math intervention? Most likely, I say yes. If the school is known for being rowdy and undisciplined, and the kids might not have been doing well in the other core subjects. Is he looking at the social emotional needs of the students and the overall student needs for the entire school? Interest alone is not going to run a school improvement model. He needed to look at the staff and align their roles with every teacher. It doesn't go into a lot of detail, but we watched the YouTube video about the lemon dance of teachers getting moved from place to place, even if they're really bad teachers. What is he doing to improve the student population as well as the teacher population? He was getting overall results for the state test, but how was he doing that through his observations? And in the current issues by Aldridge and Goodman, there is disparities between curriculum and student needs. So he really needed to look how the students were given motivation to learn their basic skills and see how to apply them with their future jobs and overall well-being. I think the Webster School needs to look at their discipline records and to figure out why students were so rowdy. I think just like overall, he had a lot of pieces that he just couldn't ignore just for reading scores.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's
Yes,
a good point.
Matt?
He was successful in this particular case study, but he could have been more successful. I'm going to go to I wish the superintendent's office had put a plan in place for school improvement. It just didn't seem like that was evident in this particular case study. He went out, he used Clarice, they accomplished the goal the superintendent gave him. But I really wish that there was a mention of a school improvement system for helping those other areas improve, and it just wasn't evident.
All right. I just trying to remember what I read about the like just the principal's effect on the entire school, So I think it was something about gosh, what he said, that the principal's effect is not just on a small area or one classroom, but the entire school. Mm-hmm. And so where James is having a positive effect on this reading, his job is to have a positive effect over the entire school. The principal effects, however, should be over in a larger scope, because that's what we're trying to do, have a positive effect over the entire school, not just the classroom or this one setting, which would be reading. So, I mean, that's what I think, that like reading was good, but yes, did he sacrifice the other areas? Yes.
I'm curious, do you guys blame him, or where would you say the error is taking place? And I guess we're getting into opinion now, but I'm just curious, where do you think the ultimate error lies? Is it James, or is it the preparation process, or what? Let's chase a rabbit for a second, Well,
I don't think that there's that any one person was to blame or cause an error. I just think that when he got the job, it was like, hey, reading is bad here. This is what we're putting you in here. I need you to boost morale, and I need you to get these reading scores up. So possibly he's put pressure on himself, like, hey, I need to do a good job. It's my first year. I'm going to take the morale to another place, but I also need to focus on this reading. And then there was no one there, Clarice was about the reading. There was no one on his shoulder saying, hey, it's not just about reading. Like, I know we need to get these reading scores up, but we also can't get behind in the other areas. So therefore, that's where it comes into play. He better have some really good assistant principals, because one of them should have been in his ear saying, hey, I know we really got to focus on this, on these reading scores and improvements in reading, but we have all these other areas that we can't fall behind, because if you get behind, you know, the 1 year with everything else, and now we got to dig ourselves out of another hole.
I mean, how does the old additive go? The buck stops with me. I feel like he wasn't to blame or anything of that nature, but if he took on this responsibility, then he did need to see the school as a whole. He probably had some amazing people working in his corner, like Clarice, as well as the staff. But I agree with Matt. Maybe if he had put more of a strategic plan in place, they wouldn't have to go back years later to look at math or science.
Right.
They could do it all together.
Right.
Well, thank you for letting me chase a rabbit just for a little bit. Just curious to what the thoughts are. I'm always thinking, where did the system fail? You know, where did we go wrong? So,
Hey, but that's a lesson for us, right? When we get that first year principal job, that we're not going down and say, hey, let's just focus on reading.
right.
And make sure we focus on the whole part. All right,
Wow,
guys.
Shay, fantastic job. Good job.
Yeah. So do you guys have anything else you want to add, talk about? We went down the rabbit hole, so want to get back out of the rabbit hole. Questions 1, 2, or 3, or the case study?
I appreciate
All
you.
in all, it looks great. And thank you, Shay.
All right. No problem. Going to